Welcome to Sting Tao's podcast. Today we're diving into a business story that, honestly, still feels almost unbelievable.
Oh, you mean Coca-Cola's new Coke?
Exactly. Back in the 1980s and the backlash. Wow. Just this massive wave of anger it kicked off.
It really was something.
And look, you want the key takeaways, right? Without digging through tons of reports. So that's what we're doing. Think of this as your shortcut, but still a thorough one, to understanding this huge marketing moment.
And the psychology behind it, which is maybe the most fascinating part.
Definitely. It's a case study that, well, it just keeps teaching us things.
Especially about how even the biggest, most successful companies can really misread their audience.
Right. And what's key here, like you said, is Coke wasn't some failing brand trying a last-ditch effort.
No, not at all. They were huge, dominant, really, in the 80s.
Absolutely. I mean, think back. By 1892, Coca-Cola wasn't just pop. It was like woven into American culture.
Deeply embedded. That logo, the feeling around it.
Totally. Intense brand loyalty, instant recognition. But then the 80s happened. And even though they were on top, Coke decided we need a change.
Yeah. The sources don't spell out every single pressure. Maybe Pepsi was nipping at their heels, you know?
Could be. Or just evolving tastes. Whatever it was, they made this monumental call.
After nearly 100 years, change the formula.
The iconic formula.
A seriously bold move. Risky, you could say, given that history.
But it wasn't on a whim, right? They didn't just guess.
Oh, no, they poured money into research. Lots of consumer taste tests for this new formula.
Okay, and this is where it gets weird. Because the research, the data, it suggested people actually liked the taste of New Coke.
They preferred it in blind tests.
So based on that data, they went ahead. Big launch. New Coke is here.
And then, bam,
Yeah.
the floor just dropped out.
It really did. The public reaction wasn't just meh, it was instant and negative.
Fierce is the word. For a lot of their core customers, it felt like, well, like a betrayal.
That Marketing Words article nails it. For the hardcore fans, changing Coke felt like an act of treason.
Treason over a soda. That shows you the emotional power.
It really does. And it flags up the big thing their research missed, didn't it?
Completely missed. That deep and abiding emotional attachment, as they put it.
Yeah. People didn't just drink Coke. They felt connected to it.
Their president at the time, Kiev, basically said they were stunned. The research just couldn't measure that connection.
And the reversal was so fast.
Unbelievably fast. Just 2.5 months after launch.
They had to backtrack, announce the original was coming back.
Renamed Coke Classic.
Right. New Coke kind of lingered for a while, but eventually just poof, gone.
And the return of Coke Classic, that's a huge part of the story, too. It didn't just scrape by.
No, it boomed. The market share numbers are pretty telling.
What were they again? Like 18.9% in 87?
Yeah, up to 20% by 89. Then jumping to 43% in 2005 and even 48% by 2015.
What makes you wonder, maybe the whole fiasco ironically made people love the original even more?
Could be. But there's that alternative idea from Marketing Words. What if they hadn't replaced it?
What if they just added New Coke as another option?
Yeah. Keep the original, which had, 24% market share already? Solid.
And then launch the new one alongside it. Maybe grab some new customers, maybe tempt some Pepsi fans.
And get more shelf space, like the article says.
Makes you think, could they have avoided the whole PR nightmare with just a different rollout strategy?
It definitely puts a spotlight on their decision process.
And that brings us right to cognitive biases, doesn't it? How our thinking can go off track.
Yeah, this whole thing is like a masterclass in that. Let's start with confirmation bias.
Okay, so the Wikipedia article explains it as basically our tendency to look for stuff that confirms what we already think.
Right. So applying that to New Coke, the researchers probably started believing the new formula was better.
Based on those taste tests, yeah.
So confirmation bias means they might have focused only on the positive feedback.
Exactly. And maybe downplayed or didn't even see the warning signs or alternative views.
Like maybe ignoring the few people in tests who hated it, or focusing only on taste, not feeling.
Precisely. The Wikipedia article even mentions experiments where people cling to wrong ideas, even when the evidence says otherwise.
It's easy to imagine that inside Coke, once the new Coke is better idea took hold, it was hard to challenge.
Especially with that cultural status quo. It's hard to argue against success, even potential future success.
And you mentioned groupthink earlier. Maybe not explicitly named in the sources for Coke, but you can sense it.
You can. A decision this big goes up the chain, lots of people involved.
So maybe people who did worry about the emotional connection, the heritage, maybe they didn't speak up.
Or maybe they did, but weren't really heard. In that kind of group dynamic, consensus can be powerful.
Yeah, the pressure to agree. Then there's the issue of using, like, small data
Right. Using those sensory tests, those taste tests in lab.
to predict how millions of people would react in the real world.
Exactly.
Hmm.
That article on sensory perception talks about evaluating food.
Mm.
Taste tests measure one thing, right? Immediate preference in a sterile setting.
But they don't capture habit or nostalgia
Mm.
or identity.
None of that, which connects to the Zappi article on survey bias. Bad questions or the wrong sample group.
Gives you a misleading picture. The taste tests gave them an answer, but not the answer they needed.
Which is about the user perspective, the emotional side.
Because Coke had spent decades, nearly a century, building this incredible brand. It was tied to happy times.
Good memories, celebrations. It became almost a conditioned response for people, those ads, the jingles.
So that emotional bond was incredibly strong.
Deep, very deep. So replacing the original wasn't just changing an ingredient list,
No, it felt like something was being taken away, a loss.
which triggers a strong reaction. That article on brand loyalty hits this perfectly.
How changing causally central features
The core things that define the brand.
can really damage loyalty. And the Coke formula, that was the central feature.
Absolutely. For generations, that taste was Coca-Cola. Changing it messed with the brand's whole identity.
Makes total sense, like your favorite coffee shop suddenly changing its beans entirely. It's just not the same.
Exactly. Now, this isn't just a soda story, is it? These biases pop up everywhere in business.
Right. The outline mentions thinking about other big business mess-ups. Confirmation bias in finance is mentioned in the Wikipedia source.
Oh, yeah. You can definitely think of examples. Maybe not detailed in these sources, but generally.
Like tech companies rolling out interface changes that everyone hates.
Yes, because their internal metrics looked good, but they ignored how users actually felt using it. Or learned habits.
Or established companies trying a radical rebrand that just alienates their loyal base.
Happens all the time. That tendency to stick to the plan, to believe your own data, even when the real world is screaming no,
Mm-hmm.
it's a powerful, dangerous bias.
So the big question, how do you avoid these traps? How do businesses, or any of us making decisions, fight these biases?
Well, one key idea is engaging what psychologists call System 2 thinking.
Okay, system 2. That's the opposite of system 1.
Basically, System 1 is fast, intuitive, gut feeling. System 2 is slower, more deliberate, effortful, analytical.
So consciously step back and analyze. Don't just react.
Exactly. And related to that is actively practicing critical thinking,
Meaning,
questioning your own assumptions, deliberately looking for evidence that disproves your theory, not just confirms it.
like in that Wikipedia example, trying to break the rule, not just find examples that fit it.
Precisely. It's about intellectual honesty and being open to being wrong.
That feels crucial. And on a practical level.
Implement small-scale tests first, small-scope trials.
Like the suggestion for Coke? Maybe just launch new Coke in a few cities first. See the real reaction.
Yes. Or just add it as a new product, like we discussed. Test the waters before you drain the pool.
And that Zappi article mentioned pre-testing surveys too, right? To catch biases in your questions before you rely on the answers.
Another smart tactic. It's all about building in checks and balances against your own biases.
It really comes down to a bit of humility, doesn't it? Admitting you don't have all the answers, even with data.
Especially when dealing with something as powerful as decades of emotional connection and habit.
Yeah. The new Coke story is just such a stark reminder. You can have all the research.
But if you ignore that fundamental human element, that emotional core, it can all fall apart spectacularly.
What a fascinating deep dive. Really makes you think about your own attachments to brands, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
Thank you for listening to Sting Tao's podcast.